Shall I begin, Sarah?
Yes, please.
All right. So welcome, everyone. My name is Jaya Mansky, and I'm just so delighted that we're all here for the launch of Sarah's new book, Your Resonant Self Workbook, From Self-Sabotage to Self-Care. But just a few things before we get started. This is being recorded. We were going to stream to Facebook, but we're having some tech glitches. We're going to keep all of the microphones muted for audio quality, and only the active speaker will be recorded. So don't worry about your own image. Oops, oh my goodness. And I'm getting another call at the same time. So you're welcome to use the chat. We're going to be using the chat to ask questions anytime during this call. And you can send them to everybody, or if you have a question that you'd like to ask anonymously, you're welcome just to send that directly to me. And Sarah will answer some of the questions during the Q&A afterwards at the end of the hour. Once I'm done introducing Sarah, I'll pop some links into the chat for the wonderful book trailer, the book website, so you have an opportunity to learn more about the workbook later. And this is also where you'll learn about Sarah's first book, Your Resonant Self Guided Meditations and Exercises to Exercise Your Brain's Capacity for Healing, and where you can download her free meditations from both books and find links to your own copy of the book. So with that, it's my absolute pleasure to get to introduce you all to Sarah Payton. She is a certified trainer of nonviolent communication, a constellations facilitator, and neuroscience educator. She weaves together and synthesizes relational neuroscience and resonant language to help people more compassionately understand their trauma and transform their brains into kinder, warmer, and cozier places to live. And with that, I turn over to Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Jaya. And many of you have already met Jaya, and some of you have already met Christina. But before I introduce our host, Carrie Sipp, I'd just like to thank both Jaya and Christina. Christina's been shepherding us as a book launch intention, and it's been wonderful. And Jaya, as you know, has been working with me so often and doing so much for bringing resonance into the world. So thank you both. And Carrie, I'm so delighted that you accepted my invitation to come and do this with me. This morning we got to do it once before, and Carrie's questions were wonderful. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about Carrie because you may not have met her before. She is a science, brain health, and parenting enthusiast. She was born into hidden addiction, violence, neglect, and abuse. And she vowed that if she would ever have children, they would have a saner, calmer childhood than her own. After having 2 children and a divorce, Carrie joined a recovery group for families and friends of alcoholics and immersed herself in parenting education and quit drinking just in case. She says that she somehow knew more than 30 years ago that children's brains were wired for peace and calm more than for agitation and addiction. Her intuitive belief to seek peace made more sense to Carrie several years after she read the earth-shattering ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experience study, which took 17,000 people and looked at their childhood trauma and saw this amazing link to adult disease. And then when brain science revealed that even adult brains can change and grow, which is what we are here for, Carrie finally said she finally was not as terrified by her ACEs score of 8. While Carrie's ACEs score explains lifelong health issues, her ongoing years of recovery work and parenting education, writing her own book, spending time in nature with her kids, and having sane and loving relationships all explain her long-sought, earned secure attachment. Today's Carrie's work comes full circle as community facilitator for PACES Connection, which used to be the ACEs Connection, Adverse Childhood Experiences, but now they're talking about positive experiences and those impacts. And she's been leveraging her ongoing recovery and 4 decades experience as a writer, marketer, and fundraiser. Carrie nurtures community-based PACES initiatives in 11 southeastern states, supporting their grassroots efforts to prevent and heal trauma and create and build on the positive childhood experiences that lead to family, individual, and community strength and resilience. And we'll put the PACE's contact info into the chat for you, because this is a spectacular organization, just really working to educate everybody about how all children's lives can be better. Carrie, thank you for coming and being here with us.
Well, thank you, Sarah. You're a good friend to ACES Connection, and we so appreciated it back in January, just right as the inauguration was happening, that you explained to us why it was so important that our leader, our chief of the United States of America, talk to us about being in grief and about being in sorrow. And would you say just a little bit more about, was President-elect at that time Biden using resonant language?
Yes, he spoke very, very, very briefly, but it brought me to tears. I think whenever people bring us to tears, we know that they're being resonant. And he just spoke very briefly and eloquently about the need to grieve, and that we can't move forward unless we remember. It brings me tears now. And that we can't move forward and that we can't remember unless we're willing to grieve. If we're not willing to grieve, then we don't get to remember, and then we can't move forward. It's very simple, but quite beautiful.
Yes, it really did resonate, and that is what we're looking for. When we're in resonance, how do we feel? How do we know we're there?
Well, we know we're there if we're with somebody else, and either we're saying, yes, you understand me, to them, or they're saying, yes, you understand me, to us. We know that resonance is happening when two people are saying yes to each other about understanding. It's kind of like we can do empathy all by ourselves. We can drive in the car past somebody who doesn't have a home, who's houseless, and we can have compassion for that person. We can go home and write a check to a homeless organization that helps the homeless, but we haven't been in relationship with that person. In order to have resonance with that person, we need to kind of step out into the world and ask whether we understand the other. So it's when we use the word resonance, for me, we're really entering a two-person system.
And yet the people with whom, or the person with whom we have the hardest time being resonant is ourselves. Which is why you wrote the beautiful book, which I listened to on Audible, Your Resonant Self, which I absolutely loved. It made me want to ask you, and I'm going to ask this question again anyway, if I come back in another life, will you be my mommy in the next life? Because it's just so sweet. But how do we get out of resonance with ourselves, and how do you help us get back there, or get there for the first time?
Well, first of all, I want to say that if I have the luck of returning, then I'm going to hope that all of my learning about ACEs and disorganized attachment would help me to be a better mother the second time around, because I've done a heck of a lot of healing of my disorganized attachment and the things both my sons had to deal with. So, whew. So I'll just hope to come back in another lifetime even more healed, so that I can be a good the second time around from the beginning, instead of 20 years down the road going, oh my God, I have to change this. But how do we have resonance with ourselves? This is a wonderful question. And part of the answer to this question is that it's almost like our brains have parts of our brains have different voices. And the part of ourselves that can be resonant with our own emotional self is the prefrontal cortex, and it can extend its warmth into us as if we were a different person, as if we were our emotional self as a different person. And there's this really fun research that shows us that when we use our own names in a warm and kind way, and speak to ourselves in a resonant way, that there's like this wonderful differentiation and neural growth that starts to happen that makes, that helps us be resonant with ourselves. But if we don't even know it's possible and no one has ever modeled it for us, it's quite a different thing.
Because we have in these different parts of our brains, a part of our brain that always wants to suck us back into the bad, into the quote unquote the bad stuff. So tell us a little bit about that amygdala, that amygdala, that thing.
Yeah, that thing. First, I want to add, to this idea of resonance, that I was just reading a wonderful interview with James A. Cohen this morning, and he said, self-regulation is always at a cost. We are made to be regulated by each other. And if we are self-regulating, it's always coming at a metabolic and neurophysiological cost to us, which is, yeah, you're touching your heart. And it's like, this is the message of ACE, of the PACES network. It's like, we are together in this, everybody. We need to learn how to be resonant with each other, so that when I'm walking away from my connection with you, Carrie, I have Carrie inside me. I've got a little bit of Carrie in my own brain. I'm not self-regulating. I'm like tying into my community, and I feel that connection, and it's transforming me. So I got excited about that, and then I forgot what your actual question was. So
about the amygdala and how that thing works to take us away from being resonant at times.
Yeah, so the amygdala is the part of the brain that carries our emotional experience, and it carries all of our emotional memory, and it's dedicated to saving us every moment. It's like having a really vigilant lifeguard on duty at all times. And this vigilant lifeguard is scanning the waves, and it's like going, is anybody drowning? And even if we're not actually drowning right now, but something reminds us of having drowned in the past, that lifeguard is running out there to save that part of ourselves. It's like all of that reactivity that we have is the amygdala thinking, that we're drowning in present time, when often the drowning actually happened 25 years ago or 50 years ago. And so the amygdala does this interesting dance of always thinking everything is happening now. And part of self-regulation, part of regulation with others, is bringing resonance in. And then when the resonance comes in, the amygdala calms. And as the amygdala calms, it lets the hippocampus start to work again. And the hippocampus gets to go, oh, that happened 25 years ago. That happened 50 years ago. I'm not drowning in this moment, says the hippocampus. And so the lifeguard gets to kind of stay in their seat instead of running to save us, So there's our lifeguard amygdala today.
And so is it that lifeguard amygdala that makes, because this just really stunned me. And I loved that the workbook that came after the book, that as you were working, touring, that was when you realized this huge concept about how we make contracts, and how even as infants, as little itty bitty tiny babies, we make contracts with others, with our mothers. We make a contract. Is it the amygdala that makes the contract, or what part makes the contract?
The amygdala is sort of the central part, and the amygdala, just sort of like a lifeguard, to continue our lifeguard metaphor, is making rules so that nobody drowns. So it's saying, okay, nobody can go in the ocean. This is one of the rules that our amygdala will make. It's like a contract. They'll say, okay, Sarah cannot speak publicly. Sarah must not go in the water to swim, because she drowned once. It was a terrible experience when she was 3 years old. There was humiliation, there was pain, there was terror, there was alarmed aloneness. She's going to stay on the sand. No water for Sarah. And we all live with these incredible agreements that the lifeguard makes for us to try to make us safe, to try to keep us in the swim of safe social interaction.
And so in doing that and the brain trying to protect us, how does it actually harm us then?
Well, it's sort of harmful never to go swimming again. If I, if I had kept that contract, which was a true contract based on trauma when I was 3, if I had kept that contract, there's no way I would be doing what I'm doing now. The world is robbed of our energy and our voices and our gifts if we stay inside of these contracts. So the workbook goes like brain system by brain system, looking at all the different kinds of contracts we can have and starting to teach us how to dismantle them. And a part of the dismantling is becoming aware that we have them. Because if we don't know that we have a contract not to go in the ocean, then we just think, oh, the ocean's just dangerous. Oh, there's a great white shark in that ocean. I'm not going in there. Then we think we make perfect sense. Or we believe sometimes really intensely horrific things about ourselves. So we'll believe that we're bad. Oh, I'm a bad swimmer, we'll say. That's why I don't go in the ocean. And you can hear that in people's beliefs about themselves all the time. I'm a bad speaker. I don't know how to do math. I can't keep track of money. I'm a bad driver. I can't balance my checkbook. All kinds of those I can't when we think it's true, but all of the negative things that we think about ourselves and believe about ourselves are really trauma. It's not truth, it's trauma. And so the contracts kind of hide the truth from us. They hide the truth of our beauty from us, the truth of our strength, the truth of our capacity.
Right. And the cool thing is that you're going to take us through a little exercise of discovering some of these contracts and showing us how we can let go of those, and also talk to us a little bit about how anger can help us bust a contract, bust a move, bust a contract, all of that. Yeah, so that's good. Do we want to go on and take this beautiful question from Karuna? If we're about to that time that we could do that.
Okay.
Or I could ask another question, but if we're ready, Jaya, that would be great.
Jaya, do you want to read that one aloud?
Yeah, sure. So Karuna had this really lovely question. When doing unconscious contract work, I have only seen the steps that use my name in the vow that isn't the vow that isn't healthy. So the beginning of it. If using my name there is so powerful, is there a way to use my name when I have the blessing? Yeah. I wonder if this could make the blessing more powerful.
What a wonderful idea. I believe it can. Let's all try it, and then we can see what feels more powerful in the blessing. So the first thing I'd love for everybody to do, if you're willing, is to think about what's something you believe that you're not good at, or something negative that you believe about yourself. So I was doing the ones like I would believe that I'm terrible at math, or that I can't balance a checkbook. But you can also do, I'll believe that I'm stupid, or I'll believe that I'm worse than other people, or I'll believe everybody's better than me, or I'll believe and if you're willing to put these in the chat, it actually helps everybody to begin to think about what their contracts might be. And if they haven't thought of one, then they'll be reading through the chat and they'll say, oh my goodness, there's mine. So, and I'll read some of these aloud as they come in. I'll never finish this thing, says Carrie. I'll believe that I'm unlovable, that I'm not good with people, too needy. I don't work well in collaboration. If I start, I won't stop, and I'll work myself to death. I'll believe I'm not good at connecting with people. I will believe people don't really like me, all caps on those words. I will believe I talk harshly to myself. I'll believe I'm too weak, I'm too much, terrible driver, can't put my thoughts in writing, chaotic, bad with numbers, I should not waste other people's time. I can't really write that book. I'll believe I'm a moral coward. I'll believe I'm too much. So I'll let people take another couple minutes to read through and see if there's something somebody else has written that might even be more intense than what you wrote for yourself. Oh, such good ones here. I stink at intimacy. I'm boring. I'm not worthy of love. I don't belong. So much care for ourselves embedded in these words, as you'll see as we go where the love is in these. Next thing I'd like you to do is to say, I will believe this about myself, and then say, in order to, because the words in order to, they let you kind of reach into a place you don't usually go. Usually you just think these things are true instead of going, I believe this in order to. So just see what your in order tos are. And think also, like, if this vow came from really early in my life, how did it make my mom safe for me to have this vow? Or how did it make me belong to my family to have this vow? How did it let me exist without leaving everybody behind? How does this limitation or belief about myself how did it make my young life more livable? And just go in order to, and let's put the in order tos in the chat as well. And I'll read some of those aloud too. In order to make my mother more comfortable. Yeah.
Because Sarah, you talk about how as infants, all we have to trade on is our central nervous systems.
Yes.
And so how, as we make that contract, we give our central nervous systems away.
Yeah.
And as we get older, our central nervous systems control everything, and how that can just crush us if we can't regain. So this is about getting that back. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And so if we think about the nervous system, what are we doing when we shame ourselves? We're turning the volume down on our own existence. And Beatrice Beebe's beautiful research from the last 4 or 5 decades in New York City, she took mamas and babies, and if you're seeing Carrie's face besides my face side by side, this is what she's looking at. She's looking at a mama and a baby looking at each other. And then she's stopping it and looking frame by frame at how there's an interaction. What she discovered is that by the age of 4 months, the baby is only making the facial expressions that the mama can make easily. So the baby, if the mama can't reflect sadness, the baby stops making sad faces. All babies are born with all the facial expressions, but we start to edit them for public consumption, starting before we even have words. So part of what we're looking at when we see the amazing in order tos is we're looking at the ways in which we've been leveraging our nervous systems to be smaller than we are and to fit in to our families and our communities, and to also save ourselves from terrible danger of humiliation and even threat of violence, of course. So here I'll read some of the other in order tos. In order to not reach for things I don't deserve, in order to feel safe, in order to protect myself against rejection, which allows my family to feel okay about themselves, in order to make my parents proud and not suffer in order not to suffer humiliation, in order to align with my father's sense of scarcity, in order to feel I matter and have significance, in order to protect myself from my mother, in order to be accepted, in order not to take risks so my mother would feel safe. I believed I was selfish in order to make my parents feel important, to not give up and die, to not rock the boat and change who I am in the family. I shut down in order to feel safe, in order to fit in with my family, in order to make the messy normal, in order to make sense of being beaten. This is so important. We're often making so much sense out of lives that are chaotic and dangerous, really dangerous, in order to diffuse the tension in the family. Oh my goodness, such beautiful things. And so my heart goes out to every one of the children that we were that leveraged our own nervous systems in order to support and heal and balance our families of origin. Yeah, so many beautiful things. And now the next step is you've made these contracts with yourself. You, as a little one, often made these pre-verbal contracts that were all about leveraging your own capacity to be in certain nervous system states in order to balance your family. You've made these contracts with yourself. So now we get to ask ourselves, just say to yourself aloud or inside your own brain, say essential self. And you can say essential self of Karuna or essential self of Sonia or essential self of Christina. You can say, did you hear this contract? And this is an interesting question because sometimes we're making the contract and our essential selves are like going, la, 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 la. I am not involved in Sarah's life at all. So that's why we want to ask that first question. Did you hear this contract? And if you didn't hear it, then you just say it again. And if you did hear it, then the next question is, do you want your person to keep this contract? Yeah. And then if you say no, then the next step is to say, again, using your name, Sarah, I release you from this contract and I revoke this vow. And instead, and here we can put in another name, you can say, and instead, Sarah, I give you my blessing to, and now, if you've gotten a desire to release, which may not happen, but if it did, let's put the blessings into the chat now. In order to, I give you my blessing to write another book, finish the job, and clean up my room, to shine your light as bright as you know it is inside. The blessing to be seen, to be yourself, to speak up freely. Beautiful blessings. Find and share joy, to enjoy my lovableness, to speak freely to judgment. I give you my blessing to reach for what you desire, to trust yourself, to feel. And these are such beautiful releases. Now, if your essential self said, no way am I letting go of this contract, this is too important, one of the things that's happening is that your lifeguard amygdala is on the job. And it's like, no, you're not going to go in the water. So part of what we get to do if we get a no, I'm not going to release this contract, is to begin to acknowledge the impact of trauma on our small bodies, on our amygdalas. And we get to say, in a way, amygdala, do you need acknowledgement that that water was really dangerous? And that when you were 4 years old, it was like an electrical shock in that water. Do you need some acknowledgement that you nearly died when you went in there? And you just kind of get to see what happens with that resonance, again, that two-person system where we're asking ourselves and answering ourselves and kind of checking in. So see now, if once you acknowledge the enormity of the trauma and that this vow made sense in a certain point in time, then see if your essential self is now more willing to release the contract. There are other steps as well that are outlined in the workbook that take you through all different kinds of things, like what if your contract is made to your mom and not to you? How do you release that? This is a wonderful thing where we step into being our mother's essential self. Does our mother's essential self really want this contract to stay with us? And the reason we get to work with our internalized parents is because we have them in our brain. Doesn't matter if they died 25 years ago, they're still right here. Moshe Zhif says that our mother is in every cell of our prefrontal cortex. so it's like we have proprietary rights to work with our internalized mothers, and we have proprietary rights to begin to heal our internal mothers as well as to heal our own selves, because we're transforming the way the brain holds us. We're transforming our own brains. And let's see what's
There, I'd love to put Moshe Zhif's name in the chat, but I cannot remember how to spell his last name again.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's SZYF. Yeah. And he does.
Thank you so much.
Here, I got it in. He does marvelous YouTube videos where he's at least semi-comprehensible. He's an epigeneticist from Montreal. So his research papers are very much, for me, almost incomprehensible. But his YouTube interviews are spectacular. And I saw him at a conference in Vancouver, BC, and that was where he said, your mother is in every cell of your prefrontal cortex. And there were 500 people in the room. And everybody goes, oh. He's also the fellow, such an amazing researcher who showed us that our epigenetic sheath, the protein sheath around the DNA, shows the impact of trauma that our families have lived through. He saw that the Quebec ice storm could be found in the DNA of everybody who'd lived through the Quebec ice storm. He says, in another 30 years, we will be able to read the impact of history on our DNA, on the protein sheath around our DNA. We'll be able to know what historical events our families lived through, the generations past. Just like with trees, when you cut a tree and you look at the different rings, you can see what kind of year it was. We'll be able to say, oh, my family lived through genocide. My family lived through terrible forest fires. My family lived through earthquakes. And we could be able to actually track these things. And so let's read a couple more blessings. To let go of chronic pain, to connect with those who are safe and kind, to know that you are worthy of beautiful aesthetic space and you have everything you need to create it, to love myself just as I am, to play and have fun, to flourish in all you do, knowing you've offered your best for today. Such beauty. And so now thank you all for doing the contract release process together, because as we read each other's contract releases, we really see what's possible beyond even what we've thought of for ourselves. There's such a lovely sense of movement.
Yeah, this makes me wonder, and somebody in the chat had a really interesting question that she was wondering about. Do you think that means that both her birth mother and her adoptive mothers are living in her prefrontal cortex?
I love that question. And Moshe Zhif did not answer that question. I didn't hear anybody ask that of him at that particular conference. So I'm going to have to guess. And my guess is that both of them would be there. That during those 9 months when we're inside of our birth mother's womb, we are getting used to the way that she self-regulates. So we are getting used to which emotions are okay and which emotions are not okay, even before we come out. But everybody, as Beatrice Beebe says, everybody's born with all the facial expressions. So the impact of facial expressions hasn't happened yet, but it starts to change when we come into visual contact with other faces. And what we know is that, so then the adoptive mother, if the adoptive mother is with us in those first 4 months, that would that would be informing our facial expressions. Babies accommodate themselves to the attachment styles of their caregivers quite quickly. 1.5 months it only takes an adopted baby to get used to their adoptive mother. It takes an older child more like 2 years. And if we're talking about adults moving into, as Carrie referenced for us in the very beginning, earned secure attachment, that happens if we're avoidantly attached or ambivalently attached, and we get into relationship with a securely attached person. It only takes about 5 years for grown-ups' brains to start to shift toward earned secure attachment. So this is what Carrie's life and work is about, and certainly what my life and work is about how even as adults we are so enormously changed and healed by the relationships that we have.
Yeah, because it's such something that I wondered about so much. What would secure attachment feel like? I mean, before I really experienced it in relationship with others, because we heal in relationships.
Yeah.
And yeah, so what happens with blind babies then, do you think, if they can't see those facial expressions?
I haven't seen that. I saw that research once, but it was like 6 years ago. So I'm trying to remember. But I think, as always, when we lose one of the senses, the cortex that's devoted to that sense then gets devoted to whatever senses we have, so that our visual cortex turns into it gets taken over by our auditory cortex. And when we have that incredible brain area devoted to auditory cortex, we're listening for emotions. And the expression in our voice and vocal tones is what would reflect kind of what we're seeing and what we're integrating from the world around us. Instead of our facial expressions, it would be more like what's happening with our voice, how much aliveness and how much emotion can be displayed in a voice. Humans know within 13 milliseconds what emotion is in another person's voice. Yeah, we are.
Wow, what incredible processors these things are that are that may be overrun by the amygdala, where we're trying to stay in control and living on full alert all the time. But we didn't get to this last time, and it's something that is so interesting to me, is because you talk about it a lot in the book, but the layers of addiction. How does addiction prevent secure attachment and take us out of resonance?
Yeah, what a gorgeous question. And especially right now, such an interesting question when we're entering a time when we're getting to, thank God, decriminalize so many substances that change us. The thing about babies and substances is that when an adult is using the substance to regulate, then the adult is not truly in relationship with the baby anymore. And so this fine interplay of facial expressions between mom and baby doesn't get a chance to happen. And I'm actually going to include devices, social media devices, in our addictions, because how often now are we seeing moms walking with their babies and looking at their cell phone and not at their babies? So we are really entering a time where babies are getting less than ever before in terms of the kind of social interaction and connection that babies need. And we're even seeing this kind of thing reflected in attachment outcomes. The attachment outcomes for the United States, for example, have been changing over the last 50 years, with secure attachment going down and avoidant attachment going up. So we need each other, and drugs, alcohol, and our behavioral addictions all prevent babies from having the amount of connection that they need. Now, I just want to hold us all, mamas, with immense amount of tenderness, because it, especially if we have traumatic or disorganized attachment, it's really hard to be a mom. It's really hard and it's really boring sometimes. And we need community. We need a live community. And of course, we've been living through a pandemic, and live community has been hard to come by. So this is such a complex question, Carrie. How am I doing on even opening the door to peek through?
I think it's a good peek through, and at the same time, we are all so overcome. And we talked about the news this morning and how that becomes its own addiction, and the difference between the fake news and the quote unquote real news. And then the epigenetics of trauma, how some populations suffer, African American people and Native American people being more predisposed to certain issues or illnesses. Native Americans addiction, and African Americans hypertension and diabetes, and so that all that. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Well, so much of what we're seeing is systemic racism. Just looking at a piece of research yesterday that showed that our doctors tend to diminish when they hear somebody who's not white talking about pain, they tend to diminish and not believe them, or the way in which there's an institutionalized lack of care that happens in our medical system for folks, where folks who are not white don't get the same tests prescribed, they don't get the same medications prescribed, they get sent home without treatment, without diagnosis. And so, and at the same time, this same article was saying that when they do interviews of the doctors are like, no, my care for my patients is identical, even if there's like statistical evidence that, I'm sorry, my darlings, it's not identical. Yeah, so there's so many elements. And the way in which collective trauma of genocide and enslavement, it has an impact on people's bodies. That we need so much restitution. We need so much work to rectify the problems of systemic racism. We need so much education. We need so much support. Yeah.
Can helping a nation, I mean, you talked about how in your travels, some countries in which you travel, the people seem to have more resonant language than others. And I would imagine that if you looked at the United States of America, we are not very resonant, but who does have resonant language, and how could we get back there?
Well, I think that that as we learn about resonance, we do actually start to hear it everywhere. So I have a wonderful friend who was working in a union office, and she said the most love she ever had heard expressed in anywhere in the world was in the union office, as two men were walking down the hallway, walking apart from each other, and they were saying, "F you, you a-hole," and the other was saying, "F you, you a-hole," and she said it was like you could feel the love. And research shows us that swear words actually do light up the resonant part of the brain. And so as we become more aware of resonance, we do actually begin to hear it everywhere, but it takes a little bit of work to hear it through advice, because when people give us advice, it makes a very powerful flow of cortisol happen in the brain. So we need to learn to let go of our completely compelling and very well-reasoned desire to tell people what to do, and to start to imagine ourselves standing with them in resonant space together. So we get to, as we do this work, we get to find this everywhere in the world, and we get to bring it to each other everywhere in the world.
a wonderful gift to be able to, that you're going to help us recognize and share resonance. Do we share it when we listen to others?
Yes, well, we share it whenever there's a sense of that we're being understood. So if there's listening, but there's facial expression responsiveness, maybe you've had this happen before, where you're telling a friend a story and they're not speaking, but they make this wonderful face. They go, and you go, oh, yes, you understand me. And there's that sense of interconnection and resonance. Yeah. Thank you, Carrie, for these wonderful questions. And I guess we'll go to taking questions from the audience now. And Jaya or Christina, have you checked any questions?
Yeah, there was one question earlier. Rosa writes, as I scroll through the gallery, I see predominantly females. Is there a relationship between femininity and resonance?
Oh, in my experience, there's not really. I think there's a relationship between the kind of the cultural juggernaut of what we're supposed to do, depending on what gender we've been, we have the sense that we're in. So, and I love this research too, but I can't, I think it's in Cordelia Fine's book about gender, but she said that they were doing a piece of research about empathy. And they took a group of men and they took a group of women, and the women far outshone the men on empathy. And they said, oh, women are much better at empathy. And then they decided to rerun this study. And this time they gave the men money for doing the study. And this time the men did just as well as the women, because there's a cultural juggernaut that's telling men that they are supposed to pay attention to they're supposed to pay attention to what they get paid for. So the money told them, yes, I should use my brain this way. And so whenever I see the research that shows this this difference between men and women, I always wonder whether they've captured that cultural juggernaut of being the provider that's told to men from the very first moments of life, almost, that they're supposed to be doing that. I always wonder what would happen if we paid them. So I don't have so much a sense of it being the purview of women, or being a special gift of women. I more have a sense that our culture shapes us so profoundly.
Do we have time for one more question?
Yes, we do.
Nate asks, does this lack of connection, I think when talking about mothers and babies, appear as the same thing as how trauma affects the relationship? And Nate, if you want to clarify that in any way, let me know.
Read it to me again, because
yes, it has some deletions. So says, does this lack of connection appear as the same thing as how trauma affects the relationship?
It's almost like, I wonder if Nate is asking us if it's traumatic for babies to not express emotions. And I do think that it is a kind of trauma. It's a kind of a wordless, deep, nonverbal trauma that is part of, and we can feel it when we feel into the emotional content of the contracts. Like if we have a contract never to let anybody know that we're sad, oftentimes there are deep moving emotions that come to us when we tap into that contract. And that's how we can begin to tell, oh, there's something here. Thank you, Jaya, for the questions. Yeah. And
Nate just clarified, I was asking if the disconnection due to the addiction has the same effect on babies as disconnection due to traumatic distance.
Yes, it does. Yes. Any disconnection from babies, no matter what the cause, is difficult for them. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a couple of things on the agenda. So I want to just give a little shout out to this book. So I received my copy a couple weeks ago, and some of you may have been getting it today. And I noticed someone in the chat asked, how do I get a copy? And there was a request earlier that we sort of show some of the things in this book. It's so full of such amazing, and I don't have any like high, I don't have a screen share I can do or anything fancy. But just for a moment, there's beautiful illustrations in here from the same artist, Travis, that did the illustrations for the book trailer, but all sorts of graphs and quizzes and beautiful journaling questions and case studies. It's so full of wonderful activities. So if you haven't gotten a copy yet, you can find it at any major retailer. You can buy it through Amazon, or you can buy it at your local bookstore if you want to buy it online, but you want to buy from independent. Bookstore.powells.com is an independent, and I'll be later posting a link we have a beautiful drop-down menu on Sarah's site that allows you to order internationally or locally. And on June 17th, Sarah will be starting a 9-week book study group. And I'll be adding the link to that course in the chat. And everyone who's here gets a coupon for $50 off if you'd like to join that. And Sarah, during this call, is giving away a free copy of the book. And I've already done a random number generator lottery for that. And the winner for that is Jim Cox. So Jim, I'll be sending you a message. I'll get your email address and we'll get you a copy of the book later.
Wonderful. And Christina, thanks for catching the link for the UK. The Norton has a publishing house in the UK, so it's being published there also today, I think, is the release date for the UK, which is very nice because then we don't have to pay for international shipping. And Allison from the UK says, I have it on order from Amazon UK, but they have notified me that they can't get the book yet.
No. And I just want to mention verbally, the code for the $50 off, just in case you don't have access to the chat later, is YRS_launch. And you can go to sarahpayton.com to sign up for that class that starts on the 17th of June.
And how many days is the coupon code valid for?
Well, I didn't set an end to it. So if you want to sign up anytime between now and the 17th, and if the very first week of the book study, you remember like, oh gosh, I missed the first one, you can still sign up. Mm-hmm. They're all recorded. So if it's happening at a time of day that doesn't work for you in the world, they are recorded. You're welcome to join in. There'll be rich discussion. And because it's such a great workbook, so much of the content will be things that you can listen to Sarah teach about it, and then you can spend some time journaling and learning and exploring for yourself too. So.
Yes. And people are asking, can we buy just the workbook, or do we need the resonance book as well? And I made it as a standalone. So you can just start with the workbook. And if you really like it, then you'll love the Your Resonant Self book. And there's also free guided meditations from both books available on the website, at sarahpayton.com. And I also would like to do a special lottery for to give away a free entry to the book study group. So Jaya, maybe you would do that for us right now.
Yeah, I have already done that in prep for that. And Natasha, you'll get a free spot in the book study. And if you're not able to attend live, you can get the recordings. And I'll also send you a message.
Yay. Wonderful. Okay, and I'm seeing, is there a recommended minimum age? Teenagers? And it's fine for teenagers. If you're wanting to give it to your kids, if you want to give it to a kid who is not your kid, then that would be the best option. If you're wanting to give it to your kids, what I recommend is that you do it yourself first, because because a lot of times parents will come and they'll say, how can I make my child's life be different? And the very best way to make our children's life be different is to change our own brain, because they are actually modeling themselves on our brains. So the most replicated brain pattern goes from mom to her children. So if we're the mom and we give our kids a book and we want them to change their brain, it's like we're asking them to work against the incredible neurobiological force that we are giving our kids. So very important to do this ourselves. And yeah. And thank you everyone for being here. Yeah. And what else? Is there anything else, my dears, my beautiful team?
Just inviting the folks, Jim Cox and Natasha, I sent you a message, but please send me a message back so that I can make sure that you get access. So you get the signed copy of the book, Jim and Natasha, so that you can join the book study. And if anyone has any questions, you can always reach out at help@sarahpayton.com. If you missed the code, if you didn't get a chance to write it down, please feel free. And yes, we'll be posting, once it's up on YouTube, we had some tech glitches. We'll post this video. I'll work on that. Hopefully I'll get it done today so we can get it uploaded and shared.
And people can order the book off the website too, right?
Absolutely. I'll put that link in the chat.
Great, great.
YourResonantSelf.com has beautiful hubs for both books, lots of information about the books, and then links to sarahpayton.com.
And then everybody will also be getting a follow-up email that'll have links in it. And I think it'll also have the videos at that time, and the code will be in that email. So if you didn't write down the code and you can't find it in the chat, that'll be in that email as well.
And here's somebody asking, do you need to buy the book for the book club? I think you could probably do it without buying the book if you need to. I don't know, but yeah. I mean, I'll be referencing the book and telling people to do stuff from the book, but you can, everything's always flexible. And there's a question, will this intro be on the website to share with others, Jaya?
Sorry, what was the question?
Will this intro be on the website to share with others?
I'm going to post it on YouTube and then share it to Sarah's Facebook later. We didn't get a chance to stream it, but hopefully we can get that also out to you in the newsletter for those of you who signed up for this.
And yes, there is a bundle. There's a book bundle on Amazon and other online booksellers. If you buy both books, is there a special price? And there is. Yes. Thank you for your congratulations, everyone. And where can we find it on YouTube? We'll send that link out in the email. Yeah. And there's a Sarah Payton. If you Google, if you YouTube Sarah Payton, there's a Sarah Payton channel. And there will be a link for the.
I'll put the actual link in there. That did not actually link. I'll put the link for Sarah's YouTube in here.
Wonderful.
This has been so lovely to be with y'all again today. Sarah, congratulations to you on this fabulous book. It really has evoked a tremendous amount of warmth and appreciation for my sweet little self. And I think it touches on what's best in us and helps us want to spread that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie. Carrie, thank you for making the session so lively and interactive and a sense of, I always have a sense of discovery. I've had a sense of discovery as we've done this today. Thank you so much.
Joy and wonder, and you have a terrific team with Jaya and Christina and Andy, and just a terrific team. Yeah, and Gemma.
Wonderful. All right, thank you all. If anybody wants to come off mute and say goodbye, I don't know if that makes you recorded, but I love hearing people's voices.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
It's even better than the early one.
Blessings.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Sarah, thank you so much.
Sarah.
Blessings. All right.
So very sweet.
That's so fun.
Thanks.
Thanks.